Why? Is because keep it in the family and don't ask my business. And he keeps saying that too.
Yeah,
and she keeps prodding him.
A couple things from that, Chris. Like I love that scene at the end because it's the last scene in the movie, and then the last shot of the movie is the symbolic closing the door on Kay's face. That's Michael closing the door to his old life and what she represents, because that's what she represented throughout the whole story of Michael. It's his whole life and the life he had wanted, and it's closed the door in her face. Also, that scene is like the only time really you see Pacino kind of like he like slams the table. He's like, "Don't ask me about my business, Kay." You're like, "Whoa, okay, I see a little bit of Pacino coming out here." But and then it's so important that he lies to her about it, right? I mean, that just says it all. Like, okay, he's gone. This is never going to be a healthy foundation, all that. But anyway, all that to say, he gets married to someone else in Italy. How long was he in Italy? Because it seemed to happen all very fast.
Over a year. I think he was in there for at least a year.
That's what I was going to say, at least a year or two. And I think the reason why he got married was because he wanted to start a life. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to start a life out there. And he wanted to throw somebody off. I think that's what it was because, again, he gets news of his brother being killed. He has to go back, and he wanted to start a life. So it had to be long enough for him to sit there and say, I'm marooned in Sicily. I need to start to do something. And that's when he gets introduced to Apollonia.
Mm-hmm. But it also shows his growth for the respect for the Italian culture, and it shows his ability to adapt to it, because when he's talking to her father and they realize that they've offended him and the other two guys are like, let's get the hell out of here. And he's like, no, you tell him to come out here and I'm going to come over for dinner and I'm going to treat this guy with respect.
Right.
And it's really interesting to see that growth in him as well. It's showing his growth as a figurehead in the Italian community and a future Godfather.
Yeah, and I think you said it best, Brandon, in the beginning of this whole thing, before we wrap it up. Coppola does a fantastic job with the umbrella of family and then everything else underneath it. And each aspect of the family, love, death, so on and so forth. He does such a great job of it. And that's another reason why I go back to this being an iconic movie in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got it. One thing before we do wrap up as well, this is completely off topic for what we were just talking about. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't forget it. One of the things that Coppola was very proud of this movie is he says he always wanted, if his movies weren't entertaining, they should be at least educational. And so that's why he threw that scene in with the one guy making the pasta sauce with the sausages and stuff.
What sauce? Was the what sauce?
The pasta was it pasta? I just assumed it was like pasta sauce.
Italians don't die; they pasta away. That's how you use that word. Okay?
What's that?
Italians don't die; they pasta away. That's how you use that word. The rest of us here in the United States say, well, how do we say it, Zach?
Pasta.
There you go. That's
pasta. I mean, yeah.
As long as you didn't say gnocchi, because if you would have said gnocchi, then we would have had a problem.
I said gnocchi.
Well, it's the same thing. Like here in Texas, people want some quesadillas. It's like no. Some jalapenos on my quesadilla. Like, oh my goodness gracious.
Jalapenos? Who's Neelix down there?
I believe in America.
When he's making the pasta sauce, like, see, that sounds British to me. Pasta. It's the long "aw" sound. Because my stepdad's mom was British, and she tried to tell me about a half a banana once. And I didn't understand what a half was. And a half is half. We say half, right? So half pasta.
Right.
Anyways. So when he's making the pasta sauce, he's like, Coppola's like, oh, it's an instructional movie as well. If you don't find it entertaining, at least you'll learn how to make some good pasta sauce.
That is a great scene. I'm glad you brought that up, because when I improvised the Lucas scene for you guys in the beginning, I was also going to do my Clemenza and sit there and go, Brandon, why don't you tell Zach that you love him? Give him a call. If I don't see you soon, I'm gonna die, and that kind of thing. But that's such a great thing, and they make it look so easy, and I'm here to tell you, it's not, because that way it looks like they did that scene is like they did it in the afternoon. Ask my mother, and maybe I'll get her on the next podcast, and she'll tell you she starts it at 6 a.m, and dinner's at 3 on Sundays, and that pot is on the stove absolutely 9 hours between the meat and the tomato paste and all that. Fry it up, make it nice, throw your meats in, and that's it. But that scene is just absolutely, it's definitely educational. The whole film is educational in a lot of ways too. I mean, it's so moral and mental. That you actually sit back and you go, you sit back and you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, wow, what did I just watch? I got a whole education of the Italian culture between the era of 1945 and 1955.
Well, Zach, we got some more stuff that we got to do. What's our count for this one? Is it dead bodies or is it meals eaten?
So I have one final thought. I wanted to say it earlier, and we moved on to something else. But I was going to say Apollonia, beautiful woman, even more beautiful name, right? If I have a daughter, I think about naming her Apollonia, but I don't want it to be like, yeah, you're the girl who got blown up in The Godfather. So I don't know. So that's my dilemma right now. Hey, but anyway, I just want to get that in there. But
just don't call her pasta.
Of course. So
if you're going to teach her the days of the week, it's Wednesday, Thursday, not Thursday.
Thursday. So our counter for this franchise is going to be offers you can't refuse. All right. So how many offers you can't refuse do you think? Chris, will ask you first. You might know it by memory. You might be ready on this one, but how many offers you can't refuse were offered in this movie in Godfather 1?
Oh wow. 2, 3, 6.
Okay. Chris says 6. Brandon, what's your answer?
I think there's 3.
Okay. Brandon says 3. Chris says 6. There's actually 4. Okay. I'll walk him down with it real quick. Michael, when he's explaining the history of Johnny and his father to Kay, he says that his father gave the producer an offer he couldn't refuse. So that's 1.
Okay.
When Vito is talking to Johnny, he's like, "Oh, we gave him an offer I can't refuse." That's the famous one when Brando says that it's Vito in The Office. So that's 2. Now, when they call Sonny to say they're going to make a deal, the other family, he says, it's a deal so good that we can't refuse. That's what they say, so that's number 3. And then finally, number 4, Michael himself says it. He says, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. So that's our 4 offers you can't refuse in The Godfather, Part 1. So there you have it.
Excellent. I love it. Right on. Well, let's do our ratings. What did you come up with the rating system?
I'm saying cannolis, take...
Oh, nice.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli, all right? You can't go wrong with cannoli. So Chris, you're our guest. Out of 5 cannolis, how many cannolis would you give The Godfather?
I'm a type of guy who's a very positive guy, so I'm going to go with 6 out of 5 cannolis. That's how... Because I don't believe in odd numbers. Half a dozen, either way, they're all going to be fattening, so why not throw the extra one in there?
That's what the baker's dozen is for.
Yeah,
That's
baker's
right.
dozen, yeah.
It's when you sneak the 13 donuts from your local supermarket and tell them you're paying for 12. That's the way to get back.
As for me, I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 cannolis. This really is one of the best films of all time that lives up to the hype. There's so many this is the greatest films of all time. And yes, there are some great films, but you watch this and you understand why it's on everybody's list for the greatest films of all time. Every respectable critic, anyone who's written a book on movies says this is a top 10, top 5 movie of all time. It totally holds up. And being a period piece, it is timeless as well. So it's not just it's a 70s movie. No, because it was set in the 40s and the 50s, it has that kind of timeless feel to it. And the universal themes of family and choices and kind of your nature versus nurture, all these things. There's just so much to unpack, and that's why so much has been said and written and read about The Godfather. And I'm glad we could contribute our own way. I know we're a small drop in a big pond of analysis about The Godfather, but it's been great talking about it and watching it with y'all.
Yeah, it's a small drop of tomato paste in a big bowl of pasta sauce. Well, I love this movie. I agree wholeheartedly that this is a masterpiece of cinema. We'll get through them, and without laying my cards, I think all 3 are masterpieces. We'll get to my ratings on the other 2 in the next 2 episodes. But I'm going to give this 5 cannolis, leave the gun.
Nice. That's good. That's good.
So I think we know our answer, but everybody, is this franchise fatigued? Chris, what do you think?
Absolutely not. You know, they say Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I like to think of this as Godfather is an anytime movie. You see it on AMC or the basic cable channels all the time. It's next to, it's normally played as the saga, as you mentioned, Zach. It's normally played in the saga, or it's played by itself amongst many other notable movies. It is not fatigued at all. I will never get fatigued watching this movie, nor will I get fatigued by ever quoting the movie as well.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. This movie's 3 hours long, and it even if itself is not fatigued, you want to see more. There are more. I mean, that's a lot. That's a high praise to a movie when it's as long as it is, and you want to see more, and we get more. I'm very happy about that, at least for one of the movies, but we'll talk about that. But absolutely not. The Godfather is not fatigued. I look forward to at least one of the sequels. Brandon, what about you?
I don't think it's fatigued, but it is a really interesting question because I don't think at the time they planned on having a sequel.
No, not at all.
You know, like, so it's one of those interesting questions where, yeah, you get into a series like Friday the 13th, and it's like, oh, is it, you know, like, while they didn't plan on it, it's like, okay, horror movies tend to have franchises. So we do look at these, you know, in the past, and at the time, nobody would have said Godfather 2 is on its way. And not only is it on its way, but it's on its way right away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like 2 years later, I think it is when Godfather 2 comes out. Like, it comes out quick. You know, so I definitely got to say no. Like, there's more to this story to tell, and even as in the books, in the one book at least, there's more in that novel, and I'm sure we'll get into the trivia on that on the next time. Chris, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'm really happy you came on to talk to us. It was a really good discussion. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you online?
You can find me on Twitter. It's most active that I can be. You can find me at TrekFanLV. The TDF, L, and V are capital. You can also find me on the streets of Las Vegas holding a sign that says, "We'll talk movies and Trek for food." Pasta would be the preferred choice of everything. So thank you very much for having me on, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to more.
Oh, you're welcome. You're not going to change your Twitter handle to CannoliFanLV?
You know, I'm thinking about hashtag cannoli just for the week. I'll wait till this thing drops, and then when it drops, I'll announce it and I'll change it to Cannoli Chris.
Excellent.
Right on. Chris, Zach, where can people find you when you're not cutting off horses' heads?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at MoronZach. That's MoreonZach. I'm also the host of my own podcast, Always On to Smallville. We talk about each and every episode of the Young Superman show. You can find us on Twitter at Always Smallville with one S. Also the host of Standard Orbit, Trek FM's original series podcast. We talk about all things old and new Captain Kirk and the Enterprise over there on Trek FM. You can find us on Twitter at Trek FM. And so, Brandon, when you're not sleeping with the fishes, where can people find you?
You can find me on the interwebs on Twitter at Brandon Matella. You can check out my other podcasts. I've got a Hitchcock podcast called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast that I do over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom. It's a lot of fun. I host Warp 5 with my friend Patrick over on Trek FM, and I have a show called Melodic Treks, which is all about the music of Star Trek. And by the time this is released, Zach, you were on recently. We should have had it out by now for the music of Star Trek 3, which is a lot of fun. So be sure to check that out. We're just shuffling around the orders. I think I got a special episode coming out, which has put a little bit of a delay on yours, so sorry about that. And I think that's it. You know, every once in a while I'm over on Cinemax Sound Radio as well with Breaking the Waves, which is all about electronic film scores. But until next time when we cover The Godfather Part 2, Mamma Mia!
I'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
This has been a production of MTMR Media Works.